Madam Speaker.
Steve Abel.
Kia ora, Madam Speaker. I move that the motion be amended to replace the words intimidating a member of the House in the discharge of their duty with expressing their tino rangatiratanga. Madam Speaker, I agree with Louisa Wall, who said the punishment is not only unprecedented, it is disproportionate, procedurally flawed and democratically dangerous. I note, Madam Speaker, the speeches particularly of Hana Rāwhiti Maipi Clark, which I found very moving, and the speech of Adrian Rurafi. And I want to note that during both of those speeches, the members on the opposite side were silent. And during Adrian's speech, they in fact lowered their heads at times. Because I think they know full well the truth of what was being spoken. That this punishment unfortunately taps into a long and sad tradition of this House to disproportionately punish Māori members. This Parliament, not this House, but this Parliament has been in place for 171 years, and it sadly has a terrible history of facilitating, condoning and justifying the worst atrocities against Māori. Shameful and undeniable horrors and injustices and crimes against humanity, theft, plunder, murder, and we frequently stand here in this House and earnestly apologise for that. We earnestly acknowledge the fact of that history, and we say it was wrong and it should not go on like that. The simple principle at stake is that this House is not sitting on the banks of the Thames in London, Madam Speaker. This House is sitting in the South Pacific Ocean in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And not a board in the House could stand but for that consent of tangata whenua Māori for the settlers to come and settle here in 1840 by agreement that we would uphold Te Tiriti o Waitangi and we would uphold the tino rangatiratanga of tangata whenua Māori. The disorder that was created in this House was not by Hana Rāwhiti Maipi Clark. The disorder was not created by Te Pāti Māori standing and doing the haka. And may I add that so far as I recall, every member on this side of the House stood and joined in the haka, including myself, though I'm not a great haka performer. I do know the words of kamate, kamate. And there was no penalty for us. The Speaker stood. I knew full well when the Speaker stood, the rule is you sit down. I did not sit down, Madam Speaker. And I know that my fellow colleagues from Te Pāti Kākāriki did not sit down, nor did many of the Labour members. What is the penalty for me, Madam Speaker? I have not said sorry. I have not been asked to. What is the double standard, Madam Speaker, in this House? No one's asked me. This is the point. There is no penalty for me. The disorder that was brought to this House was not brought by the legitimate response to an egregious piece of legislation. Madam Speaker, the disorder was brought by the Treaty Principles Bill. The ACT Party brought a bill to this House that had the effect of nullifying tino rangatiratanga for Māori. It had been designed in a manner to misinterpret the actual language on our founding constitutional agreement in such a way as to treat Māori as if they have no independent identity from tangata tiriti. And that is what caused the disorder, not just in this House, Madam Chair, but in our nation. That is what mobilised the biggest march, protest march, that we have ever seen. That is what mobilised the largest ever number of submissions against a piece of legislation that we have ever seen. And that party that did that knew what they were doing. They knew they were sowing division. They knew they were poking the bear. They knew what they were doing. And they knew they would elicit a response and a reaction. And they got a response and a reaction. And when it manifested in this House, when that reaction manifested in this House, in a highly orderly and familiar way, because I don't believe any member in this House is not familiar with kamate. It manifested in a very familiar way, and we knew what it meant. It was an expression of dissent and protest against this egregious piece of legislation. And then they cry the crocodile tears, Madam Speaker. And then they go, oh, I'm so intimidated. It treats not only the House with disdain and the public with disdain, but also that agreement to which we are bound as a nation. I also want to speak to Mr. Rurafi's point about the problem of the precedent set by this. I am deeply troubled, Madam Speaker, that there is a double jeopardy on Hana Rāwhiti Maipi Clark. As she has already outlined, she did apologise, she was suspended, she was named, and she took a day. And now, how is it that there is another punishment meted out that is more than twice as great as any previous punishment meted out on a member of this Parliament in 171 years? The double jeopardy is not just in any means. And what's more, the egregious scale of the punishments being proposed for the two leaders of Te Pāti Māori are just off the charts. So many days that we can't even get our head around the logic of it. I believe that under the leadership, and here I'll make a critique. We're not supposed to critique the courts, Madam Speaker, but I guess this is a court of our Parliament. The Privileges Committee represents the Parliament. We have two of the most senior members of this Parliament on that Privileges Committee, the then Deputy Prime Minister, Winston Peters, the Attorney General, Judith Collins, and two of the most senior members, both lawyers, have punished egregiously one of the newest members of this Parliament. What is the message that that sends to young people watching about the justice of this House to newcomers to the House? What is the message that it sends about a young Māori woman who has come and spoken with such certainty of the people she represents? I think it sends a very bad message, Madam Speaker. And I believe it renders the character of the Privileges Committee under that leadership as something of a kangaroo court. I disdain this proposed finding, and I encourage all people to vote against it for the good of this House and for the good of our nation. Kia ora.